ESPN has released its FPI odds for teams that could win the Big 12 in football, and Kansas is number one. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12 and a Locked On Baylor crossover. That's Cameron Stewart from Locked On Baylor. I'm Drake Toll from the number one Big 12 podcast in America, Locked On Big 12. Thanks for making these two shows your first listen every single day. Today we go over the wild odds from the FPI, who's going to win the Big 12. We also talk North Carolina making NC State a Big 12 school. That's in the works. In the last segment of the show, what's the best party school in the Big 12? Happy June. Cam, off the riff here. ESPN's FPI projections for who is going to win the Big 12 has Kansas at number one, Kansas State at 2, Arizona at 3, Oklahoma State 4, Utah 5. The reason I go down 5 is because most people have Utah as their Big 12 champion. ESPN has them finishing 5th, despite a fairly easy schedule, with half as good a chance to win the Big 12 as Kansas.
That's what threw me off. Kansas. I saw this list, and I obviously I looked
Kansas is good.
Right. I saw this list. I obviously looked at Baylor first, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, pretty low odds. I kind of get that. And then I kind of look up, and I'm like, that doesn't really make sense there, and that is a little weird. And then I hit Utah. I'm like, wait, I'm going bottom up. I'm nowhere close to number one. We talked about how it's like a foregone conclusion that they're 1 or 2 in 100%. This conference this year, just by looking at their schedule. And again, I will be on a Utah show this week, but I don't want to blow up the Utes tires too much. But we saw the schedule. We've seen Cam Rising. We've seen this team over the last couple of years. There's no reason to suspect. I think it would be a disappointment for Utah if they're not in the Big 12 championship game. But yeah, to your point on Kansas, that's a good team. Yeah. That is a good team. I like them a lot better than I like even a team like Oklahoma State, who was in the game last year, who I think might have the best player in the conference too. I think Kansas is that well-rounded. I thought people were going to be sleeping on Kansas State just a little bit this year. Apparently ESPN's FPI is not with the second best odds to win this thing. But man, we've come a long way to see Kansas as the odds-on favorite by ESPN to win this conference, and to not be like, that's ridiculous. We're like, yeah, okay, I would have had Utah, but Kansas, sure. It's a testament to what our pals built there, Lance.
Yeah, Lance Leipold has revolutionized football in Lawrence, and I have Kansas.
And they made a big offseason acquisition, by the way. Jeff Grimes.
Yes, they did. New offensive coordinator. The
They're
run
hitting
game
that wide zone even harder.
Yeah. So I think Kansas, Utah will meet in the Big 12 championships. I'm not shocked that Kansas is the top of the FPI projections. I know that you're shocked that I wouldn't pick Baylor to be there, especially after a 2021 title. Maybe so Utah at 5 is crazy. We can all agree. Like, as people who are often flummoxed by Utah fans,
might be. It probably still is the craziest thing for me on this list, but there's another one that's almost just as crazy to me.
You know where I'm going next?
Honestly, there's a couple different ways you can go.
100%. There are a few here. The number 6 best odds to win the Big 12.
That's one of them, yeah.
With Josh Hoover at quarterback would be the Texas Christian University Horned Frogs. Sorry, that was not politically correct.
Yes,
TCU
there we go.
Horned Frogs.
There we go.
The 6th best odds to win.
Are you ready? Are you ready to predict a 2-10 record again for TCU?
I should they're above Texas Tech, West Virginia, Iowa State, who's at like 9, 10. They're at 10. TCU at 6. I just know.
Which pulls me into these things that I don't even think are worth defending, but I end up defending them a bunch. And this example is I thought Tech was a little too overrated last year. Yeah. They kind of fell down to earth a little bit. I thought they would have a better record than they have, but I didn't think they were going to be Big 12 sleepers, which they weren't. And then I look at them this year and I'm like, that's still a solid team. I would have picked them better than TCU. And now I'm on here having to say, well, I think Tech is better than TCU. Yeah. And it's not like I expect Tech to win the Big 12 or anything. It's like, why do I get in these arguments? Like, I think Utah is better than Oklahoma State. Do I think Utah is going to the playoff? No, probably not. And I end up doing these arguments. And the other one is just ahead of Baylor. Iowa State, I have as a real dark horse sleeper to win this conference. Yeah, I'm not putting money on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're right in that mix come the end of November. And Colorado, I'm like, they have as many question marks as Baylor does. If we're being totally honest, they have some better players already in place than Baylor does, but they have just as much of a positional question mark as 3-9 Baylor does. And they were 4-8 last year. And they don't know, it's their first season in a new conference, which can be very hit or miss. So I don't know where this confidence of them being better than Iowa State is coming from. No. I mean, Iowa State in the middle of the year last year looked like legit conference contenders last year in October.
If you ask 24/7 that Colorado has the best roster in the Big 12. They have the most athletes, the most 4- and 5-star players. Correct. But they were pretty bad last year.
They could put a hell of a high school All-American team together.
It's like 5-7 coming up this year wouldn't be shocking. I think 7-5 also wouldn't be shocking necessarily.
That'd be a pretty good jump.
Yeah.
3-game jump first year in the conference. Yeah.
Above Iowa State, right there with West Virginia. Kansas, that's the big 17.4% chance to win the league. Kansas State, a 16% chance. Then Arizona in there at 3 above Oklahoma State, which I'm like, they lost their coach, had an okay amount of players, but
lost the coach that gave them their only good year really in the last decade almost.
Wow. Yeah. I did a quick expedited that process. True. Now he's gone.
That's something. Yeah.
Monitor. Coming up, NC State to the Big 12 is a thing. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Look, I have needed help with social media. I am not very good at the social media thing, despite the day job that I have. So I found an intern thanks to LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Right now, LinkedIn Talent Solutions is not just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job and might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So you're not looking on LinkedIn. If you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. They know that small businesses are wearing a lot of hats. They want to help you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. NC State to the Big 12 is not shocking. They are one of the more valuable ACC teams that we left off the board. I think that Louisville is up there. Obviously, Pitt is up there. But right now, it's the legislation in North Carolina, the state government in North Carolina that is pulling strings to try to keep their schools in this pod, from ECU to App State to UNC to NC State. And what it seems like we're driving towards is North Carolina pushed to the SEC or the Big Ten, and NC State left off the table for the Big 12 to pick up. And if the Big 12 doesn't, then they're done. They're in Washington State territory.
Yeah, and this whole development feels like the end of an era almost, because we've heard this with every conference realignment, right?
All from Ross Dellinger, by the way. A lot of this from Ross Dellinger.
Yeah, we heard it from the early days of the Longhorn Network when it first looked like Texas and OU were going to leave, and it was like, well, OU can't leave without Oklahoma State. And then we heard it with Oregon. Oregon can't leave without Oregon State. It's just not, they're not going to let it happen. And this is the third major one that I can remember, if not more, where it's like, well, UNC can't leave without NC State, so you got to be ready to take on both, except that they can. They can. And it's been laughed out each time, really. And I think that could work in the favor of the Big 12 because, again, we talk about Florida State, Clemson. That's a foregone conclusion. They're out of here. And that the problem for the ACC is that next wave, which is going to be North Carolina, Virginia, probably Duke, Pitt, and Louisville, absolutely in that mix. So once those teams start to flee, then I think that's when everyone else is like, okay, we got to find other options. And we talk about the outcasts coming to the Big 12. NC State would fit right into that. I mean, from a competitive standpoint, they are not on. They feel like a Big 12 school. As a matter of fact, they feel like a West Virginia, a Kansas State, an Oklahoma State.
Let's go. I know we talk a lot about like the college football traditionalists, those who like the Oklahoma State, those who like Bedlam, which you won't get anymore.
And that was one of the other things they were fighting for in this new North Carolina thing. Yeah.
If NC State and North Carolina don't ever play again, I'm not going to care. I think the general public, I know the general public will not care.
That kind of stinks, though. I mean, that does stink.
True. But if Texas and Oklahoma never played again, that'd be a problem. If Texas and Texas A&M never played again, that'd be a problem. See, like they're back. So I think there are some rivalries that it's just too good. Yes. NC State is not that. Like North Carolina's biggest rival is Duke, not NC State. So them being, what I'm trying to understand is, I from a Big 12 perspective, from even a Baylor, do you want NC State? Are they appealing enough that you say, if we can pick up 4 from the ACC, they're on my list?
Appealing enough in a package. Yeah. I mean, if they're 1 or 2, probably not. But if you're going to, wall off a corridor over there in ACC country, which would include Louisville, which is firmly an SEC country, and Pitt, which is just on the edge of Big 12 country. Yeah. I mean, if you get a Pitt, Louisville, NC State, and, name your 4th team package, that's probably not bad. It's really not dissimilar to what you've done in the Pac-12.
You would take Miami off the table there. Do we take Virginia and North Carolina off the table? Yeah,
probably. Yeah, because I think the bigger conferences will be going after those schools. And I'd include Miami in that too. If you're looking at a 4th team of that package that I just named, I mean, you're probably thinking more like a Wake Forest, which is a small time higher.
Which you would, there's no way you go
It's nothing like really appealing to it.
College, Syracuse.
Syracuse would have been a big brand, but it's too far away. Virginia Tech.
Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech are both on the table.
Those would be much
Wake
more
Forest,
likely, I think. Yeah. So in terms of that, is it sexy? I don't know. I honestly didn't think it was the teams themselves were that sexy coming from the Pac-12. It was just the fact that you got 4 of them as the conference was imploding. So I wouldn't mind having NC State there. They've been a pretty good football program the last 5 or 6 years after being bad for a long time. Obviously, basketball had a miracle run this year to the Final Four. I don't expect them to be in that conversation every year. Women's basketball, they're pretty damn good. They've had some decent baseball. Although I don't know this year, so I might be talking out of my butt there. So overall, it's like it's a big school. It's a big athletic department that's starting to realize how big it is. They will be as kind of a sneaky player in NIL too, so they could keep something together, at least in the football basketball front.
And maybe we've buried the lead in that. And this is WRAL who reports a good portion of why the state is doing this. It almost sounds like the verbiage as I read the article that they expect these 2 schools to play annually and are building that in because they might not be in the same conference moving forward. Like it's the murmur is North Carolina State. We need to write it in stone. They have to play because I don't know if the ACC is going to exist anymore.
And it's something that kind of gets lost in this conference realignment discussions because we're so focused on TV and recruiting markets and things like that. But the reason they did this was to keep UNC and NC State playing each other, plus, App State and East Carolina, because there are more people locally that are invested in those games because they went there. And so they're bigger crowds and it's more money being spent locally and in their economy. And so that's something that does get lost in all this. Like, of course, if you're Oklahoma, you want Oklahoma playing Oklahoma State rather than Oklahoma playing Florida. That does nothing for you. So, yeah, this is definitely a preemptive strike of, hey, we need to make sure we got this in place before the games are no longer against Wake and Duke and Clemson, and they're against, Ohio State and Cal and Penn State, big brands, but not the same kind of draw for the folks of North Carolina. So it was one of those preemptive strikes, and it didn't work. So that, I think, makes just everything easier for those teams, especially Carolina, to up and leave.
that is at this point what the goal of Clemson and Florida State obviously is they're done. They're done. No more ACC. For North Carolina.
They don't, and important to note there too, I know it's a little thing, but they don't have ACC schools within their state. Florida State obviously has Miami, that's pretty far away, but that's not the same issue that the North Carolina schools have to deal with, or the Virginia schools even. Yeah. No
Florida lawmaker is vying for Miami and Florida State to stay together. That certainly isn't something that, and Florida do play. And that's going to be a conference matchup very likely moving forward.
And even if them and Miami are in different conferences, they'll play that game too.
Right. And I really don't think that North Carolina is going to sit around after Florida State and Clemson leave and just wait it out and hope for the best. So, as it sits,
you don't think they'll be like, it's our conference? Yeah,
build back better. They're just gonna stay put, and they will not stay put. And NC State will have to then jump to a Big 12 if the Big 12 takes it. I think the Big 12 is a leverage situation there, which is good. Coming up, the best party school in the Big 12. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is where I go when the Dallas Mavericks are playing a basketball game, or when the Boston Celtics, Cameron Stewart's own, are playing a basketball game, and I bet on that game. NBA Finals, you can bet on the Mavericks to win the series, the Celtics to win the series, Jason Tatum to score some points, Luka Doncic to score some points. You can even build parlays. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel with any winning $5 bet. Summertime means baseball and the NBA Finals and even more. You can bet it all on FanDuel. $200 if you can bet. And $200 is anything. You can use it on parlays. You can use it on just like a straight bet, just a prop. Right now to the Finals MVP. You can bet on that with $200 that you can use if that $5 bet hits. Any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Cameron Stewart sends me a text message that says, let's talk about the best party school in the Big 12. And it was a joke at the time. It is now the third segment of the show. Happy June. BYU has got to be 16. And look, there is I have not made fun of BYU once on this show. Neither of you. In the many times that you've joined the show and we've discussed Brigham Young University, very clear their commitment to faith rocks. Like they have principles. By virtue, and they don't care. You are the 16th. You're ready to the 16th.
Hey, when we went out there for a game, there was a party going on in our hotel when we got back.
Was there?
Something like that. The cops were there, so it must have been a ruckus party.
I had a blast in Provo.
No, we went down to Salt Lake, actually, so that might be tied to another Big 12 school.
True. We went down to the Smiths and grabbed some Bang energy drinks, and it was a great time. BYU at 16 makes a lot of sense. I don't know how, and we didn't prep this conversation, so this is completely off the riff. I do not know how you could keep West Virginia from being #1.
That was wild.
Really?
Yeah. I could not believe that West Virginia wasn't #1.
Yeah.
I've seen the pictures. I've heard the stories. I've seen the videos. Couldn't believe it.
So this all originates from a list from Barstool Sports that merges the best athletic program with the best party school and kind of builds you a grid out.
Which is not easy for me to read, by the way. Not easy for me.
Graphic. It's
pretty challenged.
And trying to figure out which side is for what and who goes where is a lot. That said, having West Virginia as the #1 party school in the Big 12 feels objective. Is there another school in the Big 12 where you point and go, yeah, that's a good party school?
Well, new Big 12? That count?
Oh.
I've heard about Colorado.
And say a lot
about Colorado and Arizona State.
Arizona.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think overall, West Virginia, the overall culture there deserves to be #1. And I'm glad West Virginia can win in something. It's not often. I'm glad that they could be #1 in this. They don't like winning Big 12 championships. So glad that they got to do that. And Colorado's near the top here. And Arizona State. Those are the only ones that I know of. Granted, I went to Baylor, so I'm not like way up on the party scene, I guess. But But how about that cluster towards the bottom? That really is the basement is Big 12 here. BYU, Utah, TCU, which is apparently a worse party school than Baylor, and Houston in there as well. A&M not that far in front, even with Northgate and everything that goes into that. I know it's not Big 12, but there's a concerning cluster at the bottom of this list.
I have been to Scruffy Murphy's, and I don't know if TCU has a true equivalent. It's also in a town. It's not a college town. Waco has more of a college scene. TCU has Poop Deck, and you're like, oh, okay, sweet. The stockyards are great, but there's not college bars. I wouldn't call the stockyards like TCU's bar scene. No. Oklahoma State and UCF kind of fall in the middle of this list of.
I thought UCF would be higher.
Like middle of the pack athletics, middle of the pack party scene. Iowa State is in the middle of the pack athletics, but favorable party scene. I've heard a lot of good things about Ames. I feel like in general, and Texas Tech is kind of in that middle area too. We have a lot of teams just kind of bookend. It's just right there.
I do remember that historic party run that Tech had in 2019 when the basketball team went to the championship game.
Yeah.
Those videos were iconic, man. Iconic.
Yeah. And it's West Virginia does that without winning basketball games.
Yeah, which is cool.
With or without. I just maybe, and you know what? Maybe in general, the Big 12 is just not a very good party conference. Where I
guess not. Yeah.
Like the Sun Belt is probably this just elite level debauchery. The Big 12,
probably
under Brett Yormark's tight regime, has a standard, and it's rooted in something more
preparing champions for life, if you will.
Altruistic, ethical, and moral, right? Person over player.
That's what I'm going to go with. What I'm going to go with. It's certainly not the SEC or the Big Ten in any of those comparisons, I would say.
No. So I would go BYU at 16. I'm going to go West Virginia at 1 for best party schools. I feel like that's, again, objective.
That feels right.
Yeah.
It feels right. Yeah.
Everybody else falls in the middle. Will say the last nugget that I had from this.
That's a good top 3 though. It's not elite, like great, but that's a pretty good top 3.
Arizona State's good. They rated Kansas pretty highly as well. They rated Kansas as a better party school than Iowa State and Oklahoma State. And I just, okay. All right. I don't really hear much out of Lawrence from a mayhem standpoint.
From a I can't understand what they're talking about standpoint.
I don't know if you have any tabs in the Kansas party scene.
I do know someone who went to Kansas and partied, so I'll have to ask. I
know somebody who goes to Kansas now, but they won't be partying. They won't be. Hopefully not. They got some business to take care of. Cam, what's going up on Locked On Big 12 this week?
Oh, we are going to talk with, I hate to do this to him, put up the pressure, but we are going to talk to JT Wistersill of Locked On Utah. So there's going to be some Locked On Utah talk this week and how that might be a little low-key budding rivalry. You know how you and I like to make some new rivalries for Baylor since some of the rivals are leaving the conference. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about other stuff. You better believe it.
This has been, it always will be, Locked On Baylor.
Yep.
And thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.